Hello everyone, welcome back to the Action RPG lessons. In lesson number 12, we'll expand on the text objects from the last lesson and upgrade our NPC to sell us some useful items. But first, let's take a look at modifying our gems a little bit and make some of them more valuable. In order to add value to our gems, we need to add a variable in the gem class. And since we're talking about value, I'm going to call this variable value. Now the default value of a gem is going to be 1, or 1 money. That can be $1 or 1 gold, whatever system you want. Whenever the player collides with a gem, we're going to add this value to the player's money, and that's inside the player loop. Look for the collision with the gem. And since we're getting the information about the gem already, we can access its variables too. So we say this gem dot value right in here. So whatever the value of the gem is, we're going to add that to our money. Now, since the gems always have a default value of 1, and we're not changing that anywhere, it's still the same as it was before. A while back, when we were spawning gems from our enemies, we floated the idea of changing the value based on their color. So here, we're creating a gem as loot. And down here, we're changing the sprite of that gem, but we can also change the value variable. If I say loot.value equals 1 for the yellow gem, well, I'm not really changing anything. Sometimes you can put in code that doesn't actually change anything just to make it clearer to yourself. If I make a yellow gem, it's always going to have a value of 1. We can say a blue gem is worth 2 monies. And a red gem is worth 3. You can modify these numbers as much as you like. If you want the blue gem to be 3 and the red gem to be 5, that's up to you. You'll need to modify this code in each enemy you create, so the evil tree will need this code as well. Now that we're able to accumulate money a bit faster, let's go spend it. Let's head to the NPC class. Currently, the NPC doesn't have any code inside the loop. We're going to change that by moving some from the player into here. Head over to the player and look for the collision with NPC. Here it is. What I want you to do is highlight this, press Ctrl X to cut, and inside the NPC loop, press Ctrl V to paste. Now we're going to have to modify this because this was set up as a player colliding with the NPC. And now it's reversed. What we want to do is instead collide with the player, and if we want to change information about the player, we have to do that extra collision check. So I'm just going to say this is player, and it equals get collision between self and player. Now that I'm keeping track of the player's information, I can also change it. So the player now has the sword, just like before. The reason I'm doing it this way is to keep all the NPC's code inside the NPC, because we're going to be adding more to it today. The first thing we want to change is this print message. Unfortunately, when our players actually play the game, they don't get to see these print messages. So we need to change it to display the text on the screen. We can do that with a temp text. So I'm going to move this print down a little bit. I still want to keep that message around because I'm going to use it, but I want to create the temp text first. So I'm going to call this sword message, and it equals the temp text class. And I'm going to modify the myText component of that sword message. So it's going to be where the NPC is. So I have to say sword message.myText.x equals self.x. I'm going to move it over to the left just so it looks more centered. And I'm going to set the Y of the myText right where the NPC is. Now I don't want to print this message anymore, but I will set the myText equal to it. So myText.text equals, it's dangerous out there, take this sword, and make sure you get rid of this extra bracket because we don't need that anymore. Now in order to test this out quickly, I'm going to set the game to load the field room at the beginning. And I also want to say that the player no longer has the sword and no longer has the bow at the beginning. We're done testing that, and we know it works. So let's see what happens. Perfect. And then the text disappears, and we still have our sword, just like before. So, what happens if we try to talk to the NPC and we already have the sword? Well, he does the same thing over and over again. If we keep talking to him, he just keeps repeating that same message and giving us the sword. What we want to happen is if we already have the sword, he'll instead offer to sell us some supplies. And those supplies are going to be either a health potion to recover our health back, or 5 ammo. So, we need to customize this if statement a little bit more. If we collide with the player and we press E, what we want to do is check if the player has the sword in the first place. So if the player has sword is equal to false, then we'll do all this code here. I'm going to highlight it and press tab, and I'm just going to move it back to be all lined up like that. So if the player already has the sword, I'm going to do an else here. We want the text to be different. He's going to offer 2 options, and we want this text to remain on the screen until either the player leaves or they press a button to buy something. In order to set up this text, we're going to have to create it in the start. So here I'm going to say self.storeText equals none. So the reason I'm setting it to none is because I want the store text to be a variable, but I want to be able to check if it exists or not. And the way we can do that is by using an empty variable. And this is where I'm going to use that store text. We're going to say self.storeText equals new text, and inside we'll give a message and the position. And that message is going to be fairly long. Follow along closely. We're going to say press 1 for health dash 3 gems. Press 2 for ammo, 5 gems. I'm going to expand this a little bit so we can see the whole thing. Press 1 for health, 3 gems. Press 2 for ammo, 5 gems. So we also need to add the position. So I'm going to say self.x minus 500 and self.y. So it'll show up where the NPC is, minus 500 on the x-axis, just to make it look a bit more centered. Next, we're going to modify the store text a little bit. We're going to make the text white. So I'm going to make the color equal white. And I'm going to set the font size equal to 40. Let's see how it looks. First, we acquire the sword. And now that we have the sword, it gives us a different message. Now that message right now, it stays there permanently here. What we need to do is be able to interact to close the message, either by pressing 1 or 2, or leave the collision, and that'll get rid of the message too. So when do we want to check if the store text is on the screen? Well, it doesn't matter if we're pressing E anymore to interact because the text is already there. We're already interacting with them. So I'm going to place it outside of that if statement, just when we're colliding with him. So if we check if self.storeText, meaning that the store text exists, we can then check if the player presses either 1 or 2. So I'll check if key was pressed 1, but I also want to check one more thing. Does the player have enough money? So I add another condition here, and I check if player.money is greater than or equal to 3, because the health costs 3 gems, as we stated up here. If you want to modify that, you can change this number, but you have to change this number to match. If they have enough money, we'll give them some health. I'm going to give them 3 health, but I'm going to introduce a limit. So the player is capped at 3 health. They can't go above it. I'm going to say if player.health is greater than 3, I'm now going to set it equal to 3. That way, even if they manage to buy more health to maybe reach like 5 health, they'll be reduced to 3 right away. And finally, we need to actually spend the money. So we're going to say player.money minus equals 3. We need to do the same setup for if they buy the ammo. In this case, we're checking if they pressed the 2 key, and this time they need to have 5 money or more. And if so, we're going to increase the ammo by 5. Now, you can introduce a max ammo if you like, the same way we did for the health. I'm not going to bother with that for now. I'm just going to reduce the money by 5. Now there's one more thing we have to do for each of these. We need to remove the store text. We need to do this in a certain way to make it disappear but not get any errors. First, we need to destroy the store text to make the text disappear. And then we need to set the store text equal to none again. That way, when we check for it here, we're not going to get an error because we destroyed it. Here, we're checking if the store text is not equal none, and here we're setting it equal to none. So we're no longer going to get these options. We need to copy and paste these lines into this part as well. Because in either case, we've made a choice, we've bought something, and we want to close the store now. Now the final piece for this was if we walked away from the NPC, we also wanted to close the store. And the easiest way to do that is to see if the player is no longer colliding with them. So in that case, I'm going to do an else, and I'm going to see first if the store text exists, and if so, I'll destroy it and set it equal to none again. Whew. It's a lot of code for a store, eh? But it should work just like that. If I start my player with some money, I'm going to say 10, and I start my game, I should be able to interact with them. And I'm going to buy 2 sets of arrows, so that should take all my money. I shouldn't be able to buy any more. If I press 2, well, that worked, I got 5. If I press 2 again, now I've got 10. If I try to press 2 again, nothing happens, because I can't buy any more. All I can do is walk away and have that text disappear. That's it for this lesson. If you want, you can add another visual component to show how much money the player has. Use a gem as the sprite and set up a text just like we did for the health and ammo. In the next lesson, we're going to be setting up the boss room. I'll see you there.